So if you made it this far into the video, you've probably already seen some of the other small clips I placed on Facebook and some of the groups following the progress of the paint job on this motorcycle. So it's time to prep the surface for painting. Now you can either use your own brand of primer, but the cycle itself already has a black wash to it, and that actually preps it for the surface to be painted. Let's get started. So our next step is to actually paint the colors we want on the engine. I've already proceeded ahead of time and sped up the camera to show you the colors I chose, which is a brown and a gold, and I wanted it to look like a copper, a rustic look. I went on a second coat of paint to add more of the brown and a little bit less of the gold to tone it down and make it look more of a copper finish. And anytime you're painting with an airbrush, you want to always hold out the object at a distance and view it, and then bring it back in to see what spots you may have missed or what spots need more paint. So the brush I'm using is a double action brush. You push down for air and you pull back to let out the paint. Now I didn't cover the surface with any masking or any paper, simply because I want the overspray to then become a undertone of the paint I'm going to apply on top, and also to use it as a texture. So I'm going back in with some of this reddish brown to make it look more like a copper instead of a gold, and then I'm picking out certain parts and accenting other components that can also take that same color. Keep in mind that anytime you're working with acrylic, you have to use coats of paint. You can't just spray it on. Now take a look at how the paint changes when you use a second coat over another color and not totally block it out. You can actually see a different tonal value coming through. So many times building up your different colors is best to use different coats of paint, different colors, to be able to combine the look that you need. And as you can see here, I'm toning down all of that gold and turning it more into a rust, more of a copper tinge. So I'll spray the bottom as well too, because I want it all to look uniform. But let me show you the rest in the next step. So I left the details in the bars at the bottom so you can come back to it and refer to any part of the video that you need. But in this case, we're applying the same color paint with a dry brush technique to all of the textured areas, the areas that you would consider areas that would catch that dirt or change color because they're rusted. And all of those little tiny areas will dry quick because you're using a dry brush, so you're not just slamming the paint in there. You're using as little paint as possible and letting it drag over the surface so the texture holds down the paint. Let's go on to the next step. So we continue with the dry brush technique, but now on the wheels. And we'll start with the rear wheel. Now I chose a light brown, and I am using again a dry brush effect. And if you look closely, you can barely see the paint gliding onto the texture. The nice thing about doing it this way is that if you need more, you can always apply a second or third coat depending where you need it. If you apply too much, then you're going to find yourself cleaning it off with a wet rag or a paper towel, and you're going to be working more cleaning than you are doing your painting. Again, because it is a dry brush, the layers are incredibly thin and it will dry that much quicker. And of course you'll have to go back in and seal it once it's truly dry. So you go on to one end and then the other, and then you just tone it down or match your tones as you go along. and always reviewing it before you continue. And because it is a dry brush, you can control how it all blends in together. Let's go on to the next step. Again, we're applying the same technique and dry brush effect now to the front tire. And again, we're using as little paint as possible. And here you can see that I used a bit too much, so I took down some more of the paint on the paper that I had at the bottom there. And then I went back in and started applying at the edge and toning it in, blending it into the center of the tire. So by now you should be very good at dry brushing if you've come this far. Now, you don't have to take the bicycle apart, the bike apart to do this entirely. It can still be together. It just depends how far you want to go with your work and how far or how much detail you want to show and how much realism you want in your actual work. If you just want something simple, then you don't need to disassemble the motorcycle. You can leave it as is and just paint in the areas that are actually accessible. But by having it totally disassembled, you can now get to areas that it would be too difficult to do if it were put together. The brush can now get into areas that need that detail to bring out more of that realism. And you can see that I've already worked on the actual disc brakes and other details inside. And that's because I took it apart. It's easier to handle when it's a smaller piece. So let me let you enjoy the rest of the video and we'll continue with the next step. So now we're down to our third coat of paint. If I've already done this to the exhaust here, you can see I've got some more blue tones, but I want to add a third coat of silver blue to bring out those highlights. And this time we're just going to apply it to specific areas as if it were reflecting back some light because it is in the daylight. So the gunmetal gray looks great, but when you got more reflections, it shows more realism to the subject. So now we're going to apply it to the actual tubes that are on the motorcycle itself. And because it is a double action airbrush, I can control how much paint I put into that area. By pulling back just a little bit, I can control the amount of paint exactly in the spot that I need. And you can already see that by just highlighting those little tiny areas, it makes the whole thing pop. It gives it a three-dimensional look. So we'll do that to the bottom as well. Once again, controlling the paint, and by doing this, we won't need to mask or tape off anything because we're specifically pinpointing the area that we need to be highlighted. So we're going to do it on this left side, or right side I should say, and then we're going to turn it over and pull it away and take a look at what the reflections are looking like, because we want to see that even though we don't have a direct light on it, we want it to mimic the fact that it does have light on it. So look, it's looking pretty good, and much better than it just was a few minutes ago. So let's go ahead and work on the other side. And you can see on this side that doesn't have it, it really needs it. So let's get to work on that one. Once again, controlling the amount of paint by using the double action airbrush. So here's our entire work that's done on the actual engine itself. We still got a ways to go, but we want to see exactly what our highlights are doing. You can see that I painted the tank a little bit darker. I'm going to go back in and now start to paint the actual details to the rest of the engine. So before I go any further, I do want to clear coat the entire work that I've done. In case I do make a mistake, I can clean it off easier, and it's just I don't want to scratch anything. So the airbrush is really nice for this because it provides nice, thin, even coats, and because it is applying it with air, it's helping it to dry that much quicker. So between coats, it becomes tacky, and the second and third coat grab on easier, and then as it dries, it just really creates a nice thick layer of a clear coat protecting your work. So I'm not just going to do it to the motorcycle itself, I'm going to do it to the actual components, the two wheels as well. So I'll let you enjoy the rest of the video, and then we'll go on to the next step. So as you can see, I did tape off the bottom of the tank, underneath the tank. I don't want the overspray that I'm now going to use the airbrush to affect the bottom where I've already painted the heads in a silver. I do want the tank to have more contrast with the surface, the bones that I'm going to put on the surface of it. So I want a silver gunmetal look. So I'll have to mask off the areas so that I don't affect the rest of it. Again, because it is acrylic, you're going to build up your layers one at a time, and then turn it around and take a look and see the contrast, the change, and then to be able to match it up, and then you spray down the same amount of layers on the opposite side. Once you've got that down, then you can again seal your work and then proceed on to the next step. And again, after you hold your work at a distance, you can see what spots need some extra help. And I noticed that the exhaust needed some extra touch-ups with the highlights. So I took that same color that's on the tank and then I added to the pipes, and I added even a second layer to those areas that you see here. I didn't have to mask it because I'm controlling the actual trigger on the airbrush. I can control the amount of paint that comes out and then precisely hit it where it needs to be. That way avoiding to mask everything out. Now keep in mind that the detail that you want on your bike is going to totally depend up to you. I went this far, so I wanted to have as much detail as possible. And to be honest with you, this is not my color design. I actually viewed other photos of other artists and they did an exceptional job, and this is one of those that caught my eye and I wanted it to look this color. So it's more of a steampunk look. I saw some of the comments that some people placed, and it might be. I didn't even think about that at all. I just wanted to have that rustic look. It all depends how far you want to go with the detail. Maybe you've got some other choices of colors, blacks, reds, greens, etc. But once you take the bike apart, it allows you to go that much further with the detail, because now you can get into those small crevices and paint the areas that are usually not able to see with that rib cage sitting on top of it. So the creativity that this bike lends itself to is just pretty much limitless. If you've got an idea, then it definitely can happen as far as painting. You just have to make it happen. I do have to let you know that when you get into painting this much into the bike, you're looking at about 3 hours just in painting. So it all depends how much time you have available to dedicate to it. But once you start your painting process, you want to do it in steps where you can actually finish a section. So don't do the entire thing all at once thinking you're going to finish really quick. It really may not happen that way. If you have paint out and you've already mixed the colors you need, use only the colors that you mixed for that specific area, and then come back later and work on the other area another day or a different time of the day. It's going to be a long process, so it's not a 5 to 10 minute process. You're looking about 3 hours of what I'm looking here. I just shortened down this video to 22 minutes, but there's quite a few hours of video that I had to go through to select the better parts. So if you made it this far, it's because you either enjoy the video, you've got some ideas going on in your head, or it's giving you ideas to do something with your motorcycle. Unfortunately, I can't show you everything in this video. This is only part one of this segment, but you can see here now the difference from the very beginning of the bike and now the end result in the paint job. It's night and day. It's totally different. And once you come this far and you see the work and it looks good, it's very rewarding. So the next step is now to wire the motorcycle, but that's going to be in the second video. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with some of the photos of the finished work and a small video clip, and I'll see you in the second video.